Memory is comprised of three aspects: encoding, storage, retrieval. Encoding, the acquisition of information. Storage, packing it piecemeal throughout the brain. Retrieval, accessing that information. Your father's problem? Retrieval. It's there, he just can't reach it.
What's happened to me?
Is there anything we can do?
Some games have proven effective in preserving cognitive function, even untangling recollection, especially if there's a goal.
My father, he's an artist. He's making a picture book for my daughter, Charlotte.
This is it. One man's life, boxed up for easy access.
Now tell me, what are your most important memories?
Boy needs a father. Should have been there. We were preoccupied. Galleria Galactica, Dayton, Ohio. Right. Our first solo show. Not a soul opening night. Except Mal. I wonder how Mal's doing. You don't remember.
Hey, it's Mal. Haven't heard from you. Got some bad news.
One memory down.
Good.
Find a few more and we can make a gift. Create a work of art. It's important for Charlotte. It's important to accomplish something with our life.
Say, do me a favor. Finish Zed's search. Wrap up his story. I just want to know that he found his way home.
Yeah, I hope you had a nice New Year's, and thanks for coming on today to talk to me about ZED.
No problem.
But yeah, if you could just kind of take a second to introduce yourself to our audience and what your kind of background in video games is.
Okay, hi. My name's Chuck Carter, and I am the owner and founder of Eager Games, and we're currently working on our game ZED. My background in games started back in 1991 when I worked for Cyan and worked on Myst. And after that, I went off to do a lot of work for Westwood Studios, working on the Command & Conquer and Red Alert series, a number of other games. And then basically got into special effects for a little while, worked on Babylon 5, did some stuff for Disney, motion rides, Mars Mission to Mars. It continued back into video games until about 2010, where I got out and I worked on illustrations, doing a variety of science illustration for McGraw-Hill and NASA, National Geographic, things like that. And started Eager Games back in 2014 and began to work on what we're basically finishing up right now, which is ZED. So my background's been kind of all over the place in some ways. I've done worked on about 25 different games altogether.
Wow. You were in games before I was even born. So
I'm an old man.
a little... Yeah, I feel like I'm getting up there already too. But yeah, so I know a little bit about ZED, but for our viewers that have yet to hear about the game, can you give me a little background information on that game and kind of how it came about? I know from the Kickstarter there's a little bit of an interesting story.
Sure. Back when I started Eager Games, I wanted to do something that was based around an original idea I had. It was called a Magic Shop back in the early 1990s, before I started working at Cyan, actually. And essentially it was this place where you could explore and go any place you wanted to by interacting with the objects that take you to some place. And that idea sort of stuck with my head. It was based around the idea from Cyan when they had pre-Myst something called the Manhole. And the Manhole was this game that, you basically go down a manhole cover or you click on a fire hydrant and you can go explore all these really kind of fantastic little worlds, all in 2D, and it was all hand-drawn by Robin Miller on McPaint back in those days. But I kept with that idea for years, and when I started Eager Games, I wanted to kind of do something along that line, and the idea of ZED came along. But during that period of time, I'd also had a chance to visit an old friend of mine who was sort of an early mentor, and I discovered that he was terminally ill, and I wanted to go visit him before he passed away. And the thing that I discovered when I was there is that he had dementia, and it took about an hour before he actually recognized who I was. And seeing him go through all these different, difficulties and just trying to remember basic things and just even tie his shoe, it struck me in a way that I don't think I've ever been, really affected in seeing it firsthand was pretty hard to witness with this guy who was like, a phenomenal artist in his whole life. And when I left, it was about a year later he finally passed away, but I left with this kind of story in my mind about what would it be like to be able to go into a man's mind that has dementia and be able to affect, his memory to help him maybe want to do one last thing. Because the one thing he talked about when I was with him was he wanted to do more artwork, but he couldn't do it, and it was very, very hard. He couldn't remember how to do it. And when I started working on the idea of ZED, I decided, how can I mix these two ideas, this old magic shop idea with this idea of this man who's dying and he's got dementia. And the idea of ZED then truly was born. And so working with some friends, coming up with more ideas, came up with the idea that he was an artist, and I wanted to give him some kind of, thing that he wanted to do. And the idea of finishing a book for a granddaughter, which is essentially what the game is about, was born, and then working with Joe Fielder and David Chen, we refined the idea even further to make it about you're exploring his dreams, and you have a chance to help him connect these parts of his memory in order to fix that one thing that he wants to do, to help him fix that one thing he wants to do, which is to create this final gift for this granddaughter. And that's kind of where the game sort of started from, and essentially what it's about. So, I mean, in essence, you're a man's dreams, and you're trying to help him finish this book for a final gift before he passes away. And the dreams are real fantastic. You're in some familiar surroundings, like a couple of different houses, his old neighborhood, things like that, to some really fantastic places based off of a variety of dream states and things like that. So we have a chance to try to do something that is both a compelling story and give you a very visually rich and hopefully unique experience by playing the game, with a strong narrative by Stephen Russell, who's doing our voiceover as our primary dreamer, as a dreamer. And Stephen Russell's fairly well known for playing Valentine and Fallout 4 and a variety of other games that people recognize him from the Thief series and that. And he does an absolutely phenomenal job for ZED, his voice of the dreamer, and the two sides of the dreamer. Actually, he's like has a conversation with himself. So it's been an amazing experience to be able to have a chance to work with him, and then to get to where we are right now.
So we know that ZED is, as you said, an adventure of sorts. But what kind of things can players expect to do in the game? Is there a lot of puzzle-solving elements like you'd expect from Myst, or?
It's not a Myst. We're not trying to be Myst, and we're not trying to give you a whole series of difficult puzzles. We're trying to more or less. There are challenges within each level that you have to solve a final puzzle to basically leave the level. And there's a huge number of levels in the game. I'm not going to say exactly how many, but there's a lot. They're not really huge except for a few of them. But the puzzles that are involved require having to essentially find elements in order of fragments to help him, basically reconnect parts of his brain in order to finish this game and finish not the game, but finish the children's book. So it's very very art centric. There's an illustrator named Doug Goldsmith who's done the final children's book for the game, an actual finished children's book, which is absolutely gorgeous. And it was written by Kate Tuck, who did the actual writing for it. And the art is all the early preliminary art for the book and all the early design work is included in the environments in the game that you can actually explore bits and pieces of the book before you actually see it fully constructed. And the idea is essentially to find these pieces of art and these elements, these fragments of his memory, and then help put it together to help get to the end of the story to be able to see the final book. And without giving away too much, there's a lot more to the ending than just that. But it's the gameplay is more exploratory. It's definitely not a walkabout. Which a lot of people think. I mean, still one of my favorite games is Dear Esther.
Yeah, I was waiting to say, is it a walking simulator?
It's not a walking simulator
right.
because there's stuff to do, and
exactly.
It's being designed for both standard, gameplay and VR. So we had to create a game that's based around the best of both worlds in order to strike a nice balance for that.
Yeah, the game being designed for VR is a relatively new development, right?
It is, and it's a big challenge now because we're not sure. Cyan really is pushing us for the VR aspect. That's where they see the future, and there is something to that. But and I think Cyan's philosophy is, when we did Myst way back when, Myst was designed initially to be played on a CD-ROM player, and a lot of people didn't have CD-ROM players back in the early 90s. And people bought CD-ROM players just to be able to play Myst. And then obviously other games came along and they would play them and everything else. But it was one of those kind of ideas about the coming of this new technology that Cyan is really sold on the VR aspect of it. But from a standpoint of making a game, I want to make sure that this is something that we could utilize on your PC at home, and then also make sure that it works really well with the VR aspect of it. And it plays amazingly well in VR. It's quite an experience in this game in VR. So
yeah, I was gonna say, just from the trailers, exploring that world right in your face, that's gotta be something.
Yep, and we're trying to get it so that way the experience of playing this game, especially in VR, is going to be pretty special. And the one thing about VR, which a lot of people don't realize if you haven't really played with it, is you could look under stuff. And so there'll be places in the game where you can actually get down on your hands and knees and look up under a table and find things. So, we're going to make you really play, the VR aspect of it to really get the full experience of the game.
Yeah, I was showing my dad, who's, pretty, probably around your age, showing my dad VR stuff, and he just looking at the gun and can't figure out, like, what you can actually do something with this thing, and
right,
pushing all the cabinets and doors closed and open, just losing his mind over it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And funny thing is, a lot of people who have been our Kickstarter backers were people about in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. I mean, I'm 61 now, so for me this is still all cool toys. I still love playing with it all and everything else, and it's kind of fun to see that a big part of the audience are a lot of these former Myst players who played it with their kids, and they find it the story to be somewhat compelling, and it's an important story in some ways. I think that with the idea of using dementia, it's not a game about dementia, it's just a vehicle to tell a story. But I don't want to get all depressed and think it's a game about some kind of a medical malady that people suffer from. It's not about that at all. It's more about this man kind of looking at his life and seeing where he fell short and how he's trying to redeem himself in some way. And this book is sort of his redemption.
Mm-hmm. So what have been the biggest challenges you face with making this game? You actually indicated in your most recent Kickstarter update that you guys essentially just rebuilt the entire game and expanded the scope. Yeah,
we didn't expand the scope necessarily. The original game was going to be a lot bigger. I mean, as far as like real estate with less levels. But what we have done is as we started building it, money was a big issue. Trying to get everything done. This has been done on fairly small shoestring of a budget. And when we ran out of money sometime early last year and had to kind of like regroup, I had to let some people go, and I decided, okay, how am I gonna do this and make it work? What can I do to be able to live up to my promises in the Kickstarter and for the idea I had for the game, and kind of reboot it. Then I got along with started working more full time with SkyMap Games based out of Manchester, New Hampshire, and Neil Lorenza, who runs SkyMap, was great. We partnered up on them handling all the technical aspects of the game, and I was handling all the art and level building for the most part, and with a little bit of art help from Davis Engel, another artist who lives in Tucson, and we have a couple of other artists right now who are helping out with some objects for the final push in the game to get it all finished up. But the rebuilding of it, we had to take into consideration that it had to be smaller and tighter. And if we were going to use VR for it, we had to rethink how the design was. So we went back and did an entire redesign of the game, using all the same narrative, all the same art, but we had to figure out a way to do it that was going to be much more economical and optimized visually to work both in VR and standard. And so the game went through a huge redesign. And in many ways, I think it's a much, much better game now than it was initially. And so, it's taken a little bit longer to do than I thought it was going to, but in the end, I think it's something that it's a better product because of that. We've had a chance to really improve on it and try new things with it. So we're pretty happy with it now. Actually very happy with how it's turned out.
It's interesting that you've sort of come full circle with Cyan Publishing, Zed. Is it a bit surreal to you to kind of be working with them again after such a long time?
It is. It really is. It was something which Rand Miller and I met back in Boston a couple years ago and had dinner together. And after having really not talked very much through the last 25 years, and we kind of joked around a little bit about it might be kind of fun to eventually, see if we could ever work together again. He had a lot of ideas. This is like pre-Abduction, or Abduction was in pre-release of Abduction, and it was interesting to talk to him about what his next projects were going to be, and then I just kept in touch with him, and then they said they wanted to do some publishing and to try to get into that end of game publishing or game making, and so we started talking about ZED, and he loved the idea of ZED. And him and his folks started talking with us, and we came, to an agreement where we are right now. And it's pretty crazy thinking that I started my game industry career with Cyan, with Rand and Robin Miller, and now here I am, like some 25 years later, and I'm working with them again. It's pretty cool.
Do you have plans to continue working with them after ZED is out?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think our relationship's been very, very good so far. I've been really happy with how everything's working out.
Mm-hmm. All right, so, ZED's pretty close to release, so what do you hope players come away with after playing it?
I hope they come away with the idea of this story of this man, and it affects them in some way. It's a very personal story in a lot of ways, the game, based around an idea from that's rooted in life for me personally, but I want them to come away from this, thinking that, there is always hope for whatever it is you're doing. And, the idea that we all live lives that are going to be filled with regrets and, and challenges. But in the end, that we have a chance to be able to, move beyond that and leave something behind that will in the end be important and memorable. I mean, I think, for me that's important. And I think for the dreamer and the player when they're playing the game, that will come across, as well as having a good experience of seeing something that's going to be different as far as gameplay goes. I don't think I've seen any game quite like this. We've designed it fairly uniquely, and hopefully people will come away. It's not a shooter, it's not a walkabout, it's not a Myst kind of game, but it is something that is its own animal, and I hope people see that little bit of uniqueness that we think we've managed to achieve in making it.
All right. That sounds interesting. From the trailers, you might think it's a walking simulator, but I guess that's what the player discovery is all about, huh?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things in there too. I mean, there'll be a lot of things to discover as you're playing the game. It's this sense of discovery that propels you forward in the game. It's not like you just sort of walk around and look at stuff,
right,
and listen to a story. You have actually things you have to do in the game. And while they may not be like Myst level puzzles, they are puzzling some of the things. So you're going to be forced to have to find things and put together these fragments in order to create small bits of memory that helps him complete this final thing he's doing in the game.
Yeah, that seems to be a trend that's kind of coming back to games. It's kind of like old school games where you had to figure out everything for yourself instead of having a waypoint telling you where everything is. So I'm glad that stuff's coming back. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like our audience to know about the game before I let you
go? No, it's just that it's we've had some really great talent working on it, and everybody is who's worked on it has done it because they love the idea, and they're very, very thrilled with the fact that they're a part of this thing. And I think it's from my own standpoint, I just want to say, thank you to everybody who's helped me with this so far. And I think we're going to give everybody a really interesting game, and it's because of a lot of different people collaborating. So it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I knew that some of the backdrop of the story, but the way you described it about the dementia and everything is very interesting to me, because I've had multiple family members with dementia, so it'll be a kind of a personal experience for me too when I play it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been touched by dementia and Alzheimer's, and in that respect, we want to tell a story that talks about the life of these people before that sort of hits, and how it affects them and how it affected them. And you'll see this through the way the dreamer talks about himself and his memories, what he does remember and can't remember.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with me about ZED, Chuck, and good luck with the upcoming release.
Well, thanks a lot, Nick. I appreciate it.